I'm Richard Porter.
I'm Jonny Smith.
And this is On the Other Side of Things, the Smith & Sniff spin-off in which we answer your questions. Here we are again.
Otosot time.
Some questions from listeners. Hello at smithandsniff.com is the email address if you'd like to send in a question, as many people have.
Yeah, what this second podcast of the week is it's a way of us not needing to make up any more bobbins, isn't it?
Well, that is true. Yes.
So this is actually the factual brother to the main Bobbins podcast.
Well, it definitely sort of fact adjacent. I couldn't promise that everything is absolutely cast iron. But anyway, we'll give it a try once again with a question from David Harvey. He says, you recently discussed company cars and the status that could sometimes be attached to them. Do either of you remember occasionally seeing 3-box saloons with a brightly coloured hard hat placed on the rear parcel shelf? When I lived at home with my parents back in the 70s and 80s, a chap lived opposite who did just that. Several questions arise. Was it a symbol that a working-class geezer had worked his way up from being a labourer on a building site to a manager or sales rep? Did it grant special parking status, such as a blue badge might do now?
Oh.
Would that hard hat cause annoying reflections in the rear window? And he presumably did not need to use the hard hat too often, as it would have been awkward to retrieve.
I was about to say that. That's exactly what I thought. It's not the place you'd put it if you wanted it a quick access. That's why I'm always stunned at the tissue box on the parcel shelf, because if I'm driving along and my nose is running, the last place I would want to put a tissue box is all the way at the back of the car.
Now, David's found a discussion about this. He was Googling it because he was so curious, and he found a discussion about this exact topic on, of all places, the forum for fans of Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club.
What?
Which is, I know, so it's quite confusing. And somebody on there said, does anyone remember around the late 80s, early 90s, a fad of people placing different coloured builders' hard hats on the rear parcel shelf to act as a code for being open to differing nefarious activities?
Like what?
Well, it doesn't answer that. And then
come on,
the discussion veers off into the popular rumor, which I remember hearing years ago, that naval wives around British Navy towns like Plymouth and Portsmouth would leave a different brand of washing powder in their kitchen window as code for their sailor husband being away.
Seriously?
Well, I think this was always a great urban myth. I used to have a girlfriend who was from Portsmouth. It might have been her or her dad who told me about this, but I don't know if it's actually true.
What was the make? Was it surf?
Well, I suppose it sort of feels like it has a nautical theme to it, but I don't know why. So essentially, this chat is of no help whatsoever because it goes right off beam and doesn't really answer the question, which I suppose is why David is throwing it out to us. Do you have any thoughts or insight on this one?
I'm going to say if there's a traffic jam and somebody goes down the hard shoulder with the hazards on, I'm going to say it might be one of those. You're not exactly a doctor or anybody of that importance, but you could do the whole pointing at the bright yellow lid on the parcel shelf going, I'm with the construction crew. I'm with the highway maintenance crew. So let me through, chap. Let me through, chap. Wave me on. My dad used to have a little beacon, one of those little portable light beacons that you'd magnetically clamp onto the roof with an old like telephone cable which goes into the fag lighter.
Did he?
And pretty much made it glow because it used to draw so much energy because it was pre-LED days. Yeah, because once he was on site, he would have to do it. It was mandatory when they were working on certain sites, I think.
Okay.
But we used to think it was so cool because we used to think it was like a undercover cop's back. You're clamping it on the window and the cable's never quite long enough, so it's always straining really hard to go out of the window and then onto the roof. And it's right across your vision, like a big black stripe.
that's what I was wondering, because I would say that typically the cigarette lighter or 12-volt socket on a car is down in front of the gear lever.
Yeah, right at the bottom in the middle.
So diagonally opposite, effectively, where the light's going to be, which is because you couldn't put the light on the passenger side because you can reach. You're doing a Kojak, aren't you? And like popping your hand out of the window and putting it on the roof. So yeah, you can have this curly diagonal stripe in your vision.
It's totally that. I was going to say, is it the Ineos Grenadier which has? I think it might have sockets up in the roof, where you might have an auxiliary socket or two.
I thought it had like blank switches that you could then have wired into a light bar or a flashing light or something like that. But.
Well, maybe that's... See, if I had an Ineos Grenade, I'd have those two huge illuminating bibendums that I would self-tap through the roof. You know, they look like they're sat on the roof of a truck cab. And they would flash. One of them would flash blue and one of them would flash pink. And in the middle, I'd have something else, like, I don't know, an illuminating
like
album
a light-up
cover
shell from an old petrol pump.
Yes,
or
it could be.
That Esso character who I think had a flame for a head.
Yeah, that's right. Else. Yeah, no, I know the one you mean. Yeah. Absolutely something like that. Or even, I might just go to a reclamation yard and get one of those huge Mr. Whippy ice cream cones and have that illuminated. In fact, on full beam, that one comes on as well. People just go, just a huge Whippy ice cream. Lovely.
Multiple questions from David there, and I suppose, but ultimately, I think you're probably onto something there, which maybe to David's second question, did it grant special parking status? I'm not sure it did in any official way, but probably it is that thing of going, look, I'm doing an important job here, so don't give me any hassle.
I agree. I think but it could also be kind of boy done good code, couldn't it?
Yeah, I think that could be it, but because I suppose why keep it on the parcel shelf? But then I suppose the only other option would be on the back seat, and then maybe you sometimes need to give people lifts, and that's just annoying. And in the footwell, it's going to roll around potentially, and in the boot, it might roll around and get damaged in some way. And if you're, keen on helmet care, you just want it to look nice. So
but also, if you do an emergency stop, Rich, it will come and hit you because it's a hard hat.
I suppose it would, wouldn't it? Unless your car has rear headrests, and we're talking about the 70s and 80s. I mean, that was the stuff of fantasy back then.
I'd quite like a normal, conventional family car with a helmet net on the ceiling, like a rally spec helmet net.
Okay, well, there we go.
Thanks for that. Well, I've got a letter here from Dan and Anna in Derby, and they write to us saying, I want to discuss something with you on behalf of my pal, who's a long-time fan but not a fan of writing emails. Okay, we'll tell it like it is. We both enjoy listening to the pod and have often discussed the topics such as how bad Dyson hand dryers actually are. True, I had one the other day and it's rubbish. And that Polestar drivers are the new Saab people. Of a weekend, we like to partake in the classic middle-class activity of visiting a national trust and having a good tea or coffee. We're in our early 20s. We are not retired, as this activity may seem. Anyway, this weekend we visited Calke Abbey, Calke, Calke Abbey, which has a particularly long and winding drive. The question which we'd like to pose to you both to ponder over is this. What's the acceptable speed for these roads when little traffic and no deer/sheep are about? We're both thinking it's 53 miles an hour. Best wishes, Dan and Anna in Derby. Well, it's specific.
This is a good question because inevitably those kind of driveways have it's like a 10 mile an hour limit, don't they?
They do.
And that feels too slow when there's no livestock,
Yeah.
I don't know, people.
When you're the last one in, you're one of the few people leaving before they lock up the big gates after, because they always lock up the gates at dusk, don't they? It's always quite a...
Yes.
Never gives you an
Yeah.
actual time. It usually just says dusk, which can be misinterpreted. Anyway, I've done several 0 to 60s on stately home drives before because it's just a really convenient place to do 0 to 60s. So I'm going to say, if the coast is clear and it's a particularly straight drive with no kinks or hairpins, I'm going to say 60. 60 in a modern car, and in an old car, 40.
Oh,
That's a car
you're being
over.
that precise.
Well, because a lot of classic car owners, we tend to migrate to these places because we're cosplaying. So I think cars over 45 years old need to do 40, and modern cars can do 60.
It's the ones where it's only a single track and there are pull-in places
Yeah,
to let people through.
yeah,
And I was driving at one of those not that long ago, and again, it was like 10 miles an hour. I was like, ugh. There were no speed bumps or anything, and there was no one around, but there were cars coming the way. Now, it seemed to me it was actually more thoughtful to attempt to go as quickly as possible, to get to a tuck-in place as quickly as possible, to let the other people through. You're speeding up the traffic by literally speeding up. If everyone was doing 10, it'd take bloody forever.
I was following someone the other day through a 40 limit, and they were doing about 10. Hashtag Vauxhall Mocha.
It's always a Vauxhall Mocha, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, it was going up quite a steep hill, and I was in my Honda Insight, which doesn't have any torque, and I was really aggressively tailgating them because I just couldn't go any slower before the car would start really bogging down.
Oh, God.
It was annoying.
The only thing about those country house driveways is that quite often it feels like they're sort of... The tarmac has just been laid and the road almost sits proud of the surrounding grass.
Yes.
And there's definitely no crash barrier. There may occasionally be, some trees or small wooden poles.
Yeah.
And it has crossed my mind when brazenly breaking the speed limit on one of these drives, particularly in the wet. I've suddenly thought, if you lost it because it's unexpectedly windy, as some of them are, or you come onto a cattle grid not entirely square, which is always a great fear of mine.
Massive fear of mine too. Awful.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, awful.
Oh, good.
Awful. Because you just feel
I was
so
about to
powerless.
file this. Yes.
So powerless.
I thought I was going to be one of my unreasonable fears, but okay.
No, it's like someone
but that
pushing
thing
you. It's like someone pushing you from behind unexpectedly when you're casually looking out over the railings of a ferry.
Oh, God.
It's almost that level of fear.
That's one of my unreasonable fears, actually, is falling off a ferry.
What? We've got...
Yeah.
Oh, my
I have a
gosh.
terrible fear. I mean, I haven't been on a ferry for years, but when I am on a ferry, I go, oh, I hope I don't fall off this.
Oh, my gosh.
Because the thing is, you'd fall off if nobody saw you falling in,
Yeah.
and then you'd just be in the freezing cold English Channel, or worse still, the North Sea, or the Irish Sea, choppy and cold. And... no one can hear you because it's the sea and everyone else is on this massive... you could just watch this massive ferry driving away from you.
Well, even if they...
What an awful way to go.
Even if they rang the bell instantly to turn around, it would take 45 minutes to turn it around.
Exactly. You're a goner.
Yeah, you're dead.
Anyway.
Well, that hasn't answered the question at all.
Well, I think it has. You answered it.
Okay,
60
all right,
for new
okay.
cars, 40 for old
Yeah, all
ones.
right. But
about
really,
right.
don't stray off the path and beware of those painted boulders. They sneak up on you. You know the ones
Yes.
that stop you from going onto the grass in the non.
Well, no, this is what I was going to say, that ignoring the sort of losing it on a cattle grid, but just losing it generally because of a misjudged bend or something. How it has occurred to me that going off a stately home drive could be a really embarrassing situation, because if you got stuck on the grass,
awful,
or you hit a boulder or a tree,
yeah,
in a slightly pathetic way,
yeah,
how did you write your car off? Well, I was at Tatton Hall, and you just go, that doesn't sound like, unless you're in the Lombard RAC rally, that doesn't sound like the kind of place you could write your car off. What the fuck were you doing? You go, well, I was driving at 60 miles an hour down the driveway when it says it's only 10.
yes.
I don't think anyone would have any sympathy.
No. I know Karen Chandok, I think, tore a BMW M3 GTS, a new one, by going onto the grass at speed at one of the airfields when we were filming Fifth Gear. And there was a hidden raised manhole with like a big industrial landing light on it that you couldn't see in the grass. And it just gouged the underneath of the M3. I don't know if the M3 was written off or not, but it certainly wasn't usable again that day. Anyway, well,
Go on.
I've got a letter. I've got a letter here from J. Stav. I don't know if that's a real name or not, but anyway. Their letter is, I desperately need your advice, to or not to, but first let me set the scene. 3 weekends ago, I helped an elderly couple, whom I've known for many years, with refreshing the paintwork on their wooden staircase in their hallway. Being gloss paint that honks a bit, the front door was open out onto the main road outside so that the air could pass through the house and up through the back bedroom windows. Good, thanks for being specific. Taking a break to relieve cramp in my right hand from wielding a paintbrush for a few hours. You flutes, don't snigger. I watched the traffic pass me by. Amongst the usual Saturday social, domestic and pleasure lemmings were some nice motors, a couple of wannabe rude boys, a group of leather-clad midlife crisis donors, human Teletubbies on high-performance two-wheelers, and a pair of saddos chasing one another in an Aston with 4D private plates and a Ferrari. Not forgetting the obligatory rash of Folds Transits, white van men earning a cheeky money, cash in hand on the side in the works motor. It was then that a blue Honda Accord Estate caught my attention as it pulled to a halt at the red light. It was making a very loud graunching sound from the front underside of the engine. What a plum, I thought. They've not got the sense to stop and cable tie the under tray up and out the way. And with that, I was handed a cup of tea and I thought no more of it. Now, this week, whilst down with COVID, I was sitting at home isolating and feeling sorry for myself and listening to you SSGs talk about McLaren W1s and other such automotive stuff. What should I hear but the graunching of a plastic under tray passing very slowly down my street outside my house? It was that Honda, and it was pulling into the driveway of a bungalow about halfway down the other side of the street. Now, here's the dilemma. Should I sneak out one night in a week or so and cable tie the under tray up, or should I just leave things be? What do you reckon? Have you got an idea of what you would do already? Okay, let me give you a bit more information and I see it would come to a different decision. This guy has no mechanical sympathy. In fact, he is a serial car and van killer. I can understand Bangonomics, but he'll buy any cheap old car and run it without mercy, let alone any TLC. Till the MOT station finally gets a chance to say absolutely no more. The vehicle, he's used lots of these. He had before was a sun-bleached Peugeot partner van, the gearbox bearings of which were screeching for replacement for 8 months. Before that, it was an original shape Vauxhall Mariva whose wheel bearings were grinding themselves into powder due to a sticking brake cylinder, causing the pad and disc to rub and constantly heat the wheel up. Now, I love the smell of pad and clutch in the morning just like every other person, but not when it's the result of this level of abuse. So, I asked the $1 million pound question of you again. Would it be better for the poor Honda to be left to its own devices for a short time and end its days earlier and quicker, rather, or a few cable ties to be sacrificed to prolong the Honda's last few months on this planet in the hands of an automotive unenthusiast? CMTMB, Jace Dav. Well,
just, you know those people who get legally banned from having a pet?
Yeah.
Because they've abused too many dogs?
Yeah. They're incapable.
This person needs to be banned from owning a vehicle because clearly they're no good at it.
I agree. And do you know what? What's ironic is the cars they buy and endlessly abuse. I bet those cars try so hard to please them against all odds. I bet they do.
Well, I mean, a Honda Accord
and a Honda Accord
going
Estate
to be hard to break, you would think.
Yeah, and if it's the estate that we think it is, the one from about 20 years ago with the completely vertical back, like a Volvo 850 T5.
The really hearsey one.
I love that car. I've said it before numerous times. I think that's a fantastic car.
It's so funny that we both went to that one, because there were other Accord estates, but we both imagined it was the hearsey one, which had, if memory serves, it's quite pleasant to drive, but in particular it had an exquisite gear change on it.
It had an exquisite everything. I think there was a 2.2 turbo diesel engine, which I think was quite rapid.
Yeah, but it was that was one of those cars from a period when Hondas particularly stank of quality. They just felt really nicely made.
They did. And it's one of those cars which I've got no need to own one, but I'd quite like to own one just to tick that box and go, yeah, I've had a hearsey Accord, that's cool. On to the next one.
I can die happy. Well, I suppose we've answered our question here in a way, because since we both seem to have quite a fondness for that Accord, if it is one of those, I suppose what we're going to have to encourage Jace to do is do a little bit of cable tie, vigilante cable tying, just to spare the poor Accord's blushes.
Do you know what I would do? I would check for CCTV and ring doorbells, and I would go climb under the car and mend the dragging under tray, which honestly I'm surprised it still exists if it's been driven around for weeks.
Yeah. Well, again, quality, that's what it is.
Yeah.
The other end's not letting go.
Yeah. And I would probably gaffer tape a Post-it onto the windscreen that faces inwards, so that when he gets in the car, he sees straight out of it at eye level, and it just says, "Care for your car a bit more, you cretin. P.S. I've mended it for you."
Well, we're into, even if there is a CCTV camera or a Ring doorbell or something, we're into the same territory as with the listener who wanted to put a quieter exhaust on his neighbour's Zafira.
Yes.
What's the crime? I mean, it feels like there's even less of a crime. So you want to report that somebody has made your car slightly better, or at least slightly less worse, sir. What would you like us to do about it? Arrest him for giving you 5 cable ties and a quieter Honda.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I think it'd be good. If you could think of a tactful way to just say to them, stop being so cruel and be a little bit nicer to that car, because when that car stops working, it'll annoy you that day, even when you just go and buy another one. But he's probably is one of those animal abuse people.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, imagine the state of his house.
Awful.
I bet he's constantly falling over loose bits of carpet and...
Yeah. He's
tread strips between rooms that aren't screwed or nailed down properly.
He's got 3 vacuum cleaners. They all still work, but all the bags are full. So instead of emptying a bag, he's just gone and bought another vacuum. Hasn't he? He's one of them.
Oh, all the tap strip.
Oh, dear.
And the heating is jammed on full.
Oh, awful.
Or doesn't work at all.
Awful.
Either way.
Awful.
Okay, I've got a slightly random question here from Matthew Taylor, who's in Melbourne.
Australia, Melbourne.
Yeah. A morbidly curious question popped into my head today, he says, as I sat in traffic next to a Chrysler 300C converted hearse.
Oh.
What vehicle are you taking your last ride in? Do you have a preference? Your answers should be realistic, i.e. a hearse that's actually used commonly, no Pagani Zondas with coffin-shaped plywood nailed to the rear spoiler.
I used to think about this more.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I went through a phase of like what song was going to be played at my funeral.
Okay.
And it's just a bit weird stuff. I haven't thought about it for years, actually. So I wonder whether or not it should be one of my own cars that I still presumably own by that point.
Oh, you're going like Duke of Edinburgh style, where before you die, you're going to have it converted into your hearse.
Yeah, or a trailer that would carry me in it. And with a tow bar on said car. But I don't really know. I mean, the ironic value would be to use a hearse that's, I don't know, neither really seen as a classic nor seen as classy. I would kind of like that. So a Frog Eye Scorpio hearse would be quite fun, because people who know will go, yeah, that's That's Johnny's choice, totally.
What about that one we saw? Did we see one that it was a Granada, but it had a Capri front end put on it?
Yes. Very weird. Very, very weird. Very weird indeed. In the 90s, I used to read Street Machine magazine, and Street Machine is still big in Australia, actually. And there was a guy who'd found a 1959 Chevrolet Impala in Ireland, which was an ex-hearse, and it was factory right-hand drive. So it would have been a really rare car and probably quite a prestigious hearse in its time.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, and he'd done the most amazing custom car job on it. And to this day, I actually had the opportunity to buy it about 12 years ago, and I wish I had. It came up for, the person was emigrating and they were selling it. So it's on, for its time, it was wild. It looks like a Boyd Coddington type thing. 20s on the back, 17-inch wheels on the front. It was it was on hydraulic suspension. They'd even had the hydraulic pumps made in the shape of coffins.
God.
Yeah, I mean, it was weird. It was black with the most subtle of ghosted flames on the bonnet, really ghosted out. It was beautiful. Beautiful. I'm telling you.
Crikey.
And it's one of my favourite custom cars. I'd love to know where that car is. It's what they call a Gullwing 59 Impala. And I loved it. So if I could find that, and I don't know, send them an email and go, listen, when I die, could we hire your car?
There we go. Doesn't seem unreasonable, given that's what its job was. I think I'd just simply go with the funeral procession made up of our Eagle Quest with a matching 90s Senator hearse.
That's a wonderful idea, Rich. Yeah. What a great...
I mean, if you outlive me, you're welcome to drive the hearse or the Quest, whichever you fancy.
Do you know what I would do? I'd drive the hearse, but I'd make sure at the front of the procession, if this is okay with you, I'd have someone riding a no-name Chinese motorbike with an exceptionally loud exhaust, but they're only doing 15 miles an hour.
It's what he would have wanted. Is it though?
It's just really ear-piercingly loud and also a bit too strokey and smelly.
I've never really thought about what hearse I'd want, or particularly what music I'd want at my funeral, but it has crossed my mind to fake my own death just so I can go to my own funeral, which probably says something terrible about my ego.
That's weird.
Just thought it's hard enough to get all my mates together as it is, so it'd be nice to see them in the same room, assuming they'd turn up, of course. I mean, maybe they wouldn't, but yeah, and then you could burst out of the coffin and go, ha, just kidding. Let's all go to the pub.
Everyone would die if you did that from fright. Which would be
I think I'd have to sort of tip off, my children and my wife and stuff, because
P.S. not
cruel
dead.
On them. Yeah,
I'm writing you this email.
Work with Daddy on this one, okay? Well, look, on that slightly macabre note / psychologically troubling note there, it's probably time to end this. Thank you for your questions. Do keep them coming. hello@smithandsniff.com. Sorry we can't address every single one. We do get quite a lot, but
we do.
Keep them coming, and you never know, yours may slip through the ruthless inefficiency of the Smith and Sniff machine.
It really is.
We'll see you for a regular podcast on Monday, back for one of these again next Friday. Until then, goodbye.
Cheers, mate. Thanks, mate. Bye, etc., etc.